I object! This wedding cannot continue!
A carefully protected reputation can become a prison when maintaining it requires one lie too many. Grant Holloway was seconds away from beginning a new life when three young men from his past stood up to stop it. But their presence wasn't what frightened him most. If anyone knows a reason these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now. Pastor Leonard Brooks waited. For 3 seconds, the cathedral was completely silent. Then 3 chairs moved in the front row. 3 identical 20-year-old men stood at exactly the same time. Grant Holloway stopped breathing. His bride, Claire Davenport, felt his fingers tighten around hers. The youngest triplet, Micah Reed, looked directly at the pastor. This wedding cannot continue. Whispers spread through the cathedral. Claire stared at the 3 young men. Then she looked at Grant. He wasn't confused. He was terrified. Grant. Who are they? He didn't answer. Andre Reed slowly reached inside his jacket. Grant stepped away from the altar. Don't. Andre stopped. And suddenly Claire understood something everyone else in the cathedral was only beginning to realize. Grant knew exactly who these men were. And whatever Andre was carrying frightened him more than their presence did. Micah looked at him. You want to tell her? Grant's face hardened. Whatever your mother told you. Bryson interrupted him. We didn't come because of what our mother told us. Grant went still. Micah stepped forward. We came because of what she refused to tell us. Pastor Brooks lowered his voice. Grant, do you know these young men? Grant swallowed. I know who their mother is. Claire slowly pulled her hand from his. Grant immediately looked toward Pastor Brooks. We need to suspend the ceremony. We can discuss this privately. Micah didn't move. You had 20 years for private. Claire's expression changed. 20 years? Grant said nothing. That silence made the decision for her. No one is removing them. I want to hear what they came to say. Micah looked at Claire. Grant Holloway is our biological father. The cathedral erupted in whispers. Claire stared at Grant. He didn't deny it. For several seconds, she thought she finally understood why 3 young men had interrupted her wedding. She didn't. Because exposing the father who had abandoned them was only one reason they had come. And the other reason was connected to a man who had died 20 years earlier. If you enjoy powerful stories where betrayal meets unforgettable justice, subscribe to Luxury Justice Stories. Now, let's continue. 3 days earlier, none of the brothers had planned to attend Grant Holloway's wedding. Andre understood numbers. Bryson had the patience to spend hours studying details most people ignored. Micah had spent enough time assisting at a small legal office to know that sometimes the most important question wasn't what a document said. It was why somebody had kept it. Until their mother collapsed, none of those abilities had ever needed to work together. Monica Reed had raised all 3 boys alone while building a neighborhood bakery and catering business. She never became wealthy. She never pretended raising 3 children without a partner was easy. But Andre, Bryson, and Micah had grown up with stability, discipline, and the certainty that their mother would be there when they needed her. The same could not be said for their father. Whenever they asked about him, Monica gave them the same restrained answer. He chose another life. She never told them his name. She never described him as cruel. And she never encouraged her sons to search for him. Each brother responded differently. Andre eventually stopped asking. If a man wanted 20 years of silence, Andre had no interest in begging him for an explanation. Bryson was different. He spent years inventing possibilities that made the absence easier to accept. Maybe their father never knew Monica was pregnant. Maybe she had decided to raise them alone. Maybe something had happened between 2 adults that children could never fully understand. Micah never accepted any explanation he hadn't heard directly. But Monica always closed the conversation before it could go further. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, she collapsed behind the bakery counter. For weeks she had ignored stomach pain, dizziness and exhaustion because 2 large catering orders were due and several employees depended on the business. The doctors discovered complications from an untreated ulcer and internal bleeding. She was stabilized. She would recover. But she needed treatment, rest and time away from work. Monica hated needing help. So when Andre offered to collect her insurance papers and business documents, she reluctantly told him where to find the key to her locked office cabinet. The insurance folder was exactly where she said it would be. Then Andre noticed several old statements beneath it. They were almost 21 years old. At first he thought they were ordinary business records. Then he saw the name printed across the top. Holloway Crest Industries. Everyone knew Holloway Crest. The corporation owned real estate, logistics interests, and several major commercial investments across the country. Its founder, Grant Holloway, was regularly described in business magazines as a disciplined billionaire who had built his company from almost nothing. The statements in Andre's hands came from the company's earliest years. And payments had been made to Micah Reed. Andre checked the dates twice. The first transfer occurred months before he and his brothers were born. He called Bryson and Micah. When they arrived, Bryson looked at the papers and immediately became uncomfortable. If she wanted us to know, she would have told us. Micah studied the dates. And if she was afraid for us to know? They took the statements back to the hospital. Monica's expression changed the moment Andre placed them beside her bed. It wasn't simply anger. For one brief second, it looked like fear. Andre saw it. So did Micah. Bryson asked the question none of them had ever received a complete answer to. Did our father know about us? Monica stared at the blanket covering her legs. No one spoke. Eventually she looked up. Yes. Bryson stood. He walked to the hospital window and faced away from them. For 20 years, he had protected a man he had never met with one possibility. Maybe he didn't know. That possibility had survived birthdays, school ceremonies, illnesses, and every Father's Day when Bryson watched friends leave with their fathers. Now it was gone. He turned around. You told us he chose another life. You never told us he knew. You were children. We aren't children now. No, Monica said quietly. Which is why I'm telling you to put those papers back and leave this alone. Andre pointed at the statements. What were the payments for? Monica's jaw tightened. Some things cost more to uncover than they cost to bury. She refused to explain further. That sentence stayed with Andre all evening. By midnight, all 3 brothers were back inside the bakery. They found a cardboard storage box in the bottom of Monica's office cabinet. Near the top was a photograph. Monica was in her 20s, smiling beside a younger Grant Holloway. The way he was looking at her destroyed another comfortable possibility. They had not been strangers. Under the photograph were letters, employment records, and photocopies from the company Grant had been building 2 decades earlier. One name appeared repeatedly. Wesley Crane. Andre recognized accounting notes beside the name. Several transfers had been questioned. A handwritten date had been circled. Micah searched public records while Bryson went through archived newspaper reports. Less than an hour later, they found Wesley Crane. 20 years earlier, he had served as financial controller for Grant's small but rapidly growing company. Then one night, his car left a rural road. Wesley died. The crash was ruled accidental. That by itself proved nothing. But days before his death, Wesley had been questioning irregular movement of company money. And after he died, the questions disappeared. The next morning, the brothers returned to Monica. This time she was angry. You had no right to go through that box. Micah remained calm. Then tell us why it scared you. Monica looked at the 3 sons she had spent 2 decades protecting. And finally, she began. Before Holloway Crest became an empire, Monica had worked in administration for Grant's struggling business. Grant had been ambitious, intelligent, and almost obsessive about keeping the company alive. Wesley handled much of the financial control. Shortly before his death, he told Monica he believed money had been moved through company accounts in ways he could not reconcile. She never saw anyone threaten Wesley. She never saw anyone hurt him. And she had no proof his death was anything other than the accident investigators concluded it had been. What frightened her was what happened afterward. A few days after the crash, Grant came to her with a financial record. He asked her to change a date. Monica refused. Grant insisted the date mattered. He would not explain why. She refused again. Within days, she lost her job. Soon afterward, Grant disappeared from her life. Monica had already told him she was pregnant. He knew. He arranged payments. Then he stayed away. She had kept a copy of the original page Grant wanted changed because something about his urgency frightened her. But she never learned exactly what the date concealed. Andre looked at her. Why didn't you report it? To report what? That he wanted the date changed. And then say what? That I suspected something I couldn't prove? I was pregnant with 3 children. I had lost my job. Grant had money, attorneys, and people who would have said I was an angry former employee trying to punish him. Micah looked at the old record. So you kept it? I kept it because one day I thought I might understand it. And did you? Monica shook her head. Then her expression hardened. If Grant knows you found those papers, do not meet him alone. The warning proved unnecessary. Grant found them first. That evening Micah received a call from a representative at Holloway Crest Industries. Grant Holloway wanted to meet. None of the brothers had contacted the company. None of them had contacted Grant. Yet somehow he already knew they were searching. That disturbed Micah more than the invitation itself. They agreed to meet only in the open lounge of a busy hotel. Grant arrived alone. He was controlled, impeccably dressed, and less imposing than the man they had imagined throughout childhood. For several seconds, he simply stared at them. 3 faces. 3 sons. 3 versions of a life he had avoided. Finally he said, "You look like her?" Micah answered first. "That's not why we're here." Grant sat down. Andre placed none of the documents on the table. They wanted to know what Grant would admit without seeing what they possessed. Bryson asked the first question. "Did you know she was pregnant?" Grant looked at him. "Yes." The word was easier to hear the second time. It was not easier to accept. Grant told them he had been 31 and terrified that his company was about to collapse. Investors were threatening to withdraw. Employees depended on him. Debt was mounting. When Monica told him she was pregnant, he convinced himself he could not carry another responsibility. So he arranged financial payments. And stayed away. Bryson stared at him. "Did you ever wonder whether we were born healthy?" Grant took longer to answer. "Yes." "Did you ever ask?" "No." Bryson looked away. Grant didn't call his choice necessary. He called it cowardice. That admission might have mattered if it had ended there. Then Andre mentioned Wesley Crane. Grant's expression changed immediately. "What exactly did Monica give you?" Andre caught the wording. "Not what did you find. What did Monica give you?" Grant offered to establish substantial trusts for all 3 brothers. Tuition. Housing. Graduate school. Whatever they needed. Andre shook his head. "Are you trying to help your children, or buy something back before we find out why you're afraid?" Grant withdrew the offer. Then he leaned back. "You have an old accounting page, a dead man's name, and a mother who never saw what happened on that road. If you turn questions into accusations, whatever truth exists will disappear under the spectacle." The brothers were silent. Grant was right about one thing. They could not prove Wesley had been murdered. They did not know whether another vehicle caused the crash. They did not know exactly what Grant had hidden. Bryson looked at his brothers. Maybe this is where we stop. Micah didn't agree. But neither did he want revenge disguised as certainty. Andre finally said, "We won't accuse you of something we can't prove." Grant nodded. For a moment, he had regained control. Then he made a decision that would cost him that control 3 days later. "If you intend to come to the wedding, come openly. I'll put your names on the guest list. Sit through the ceremony, and afterward we can talk again." Grant presented it as acknowledgement. The brothers heard something different. He wanted them close enough to watch, and quiet enough to control. As he stood to leave, Grant looked at them. "Whatever Monica told you, she never knew everything that happened." That sentence changed the argument. That night Micah found the wedding announcement. Grant was marrying Claire Davenport in 3 days. Claire was more than a wealthy woman preparing for a society wedding. She led a respected non-profit foundation and was preparing for a major public partnership with Holloway Crest. Her reputation, career, and organization were about to become more closely connected to Grant and his company. Bryson still believed another private conversation was the responsible choice. "He abandoned us. That's between him, Mom, and us. We don't need hundreds of strangers watching." Andre disagreed. "Private is where he has controlled everything." Micah looked at Claire's photograph. "If we knew only that he abandoned us, I'd agree with you." Bryson said nothing. "But we know there is something else. We don't know exactly what it is, but he does. And she's about to marry him without knowing it exists." Andre understood. "If we say nothing, we're helping him decide what she deserves to know." When Monica learned what they were considering, she begged them not to go. Not because Grant deserved protection. Because she feared anger would turn her sons into men carrying the same secret for another 20 years. Micah told her they weren't going to accuse Grant of murder. They weren't going to claim they knew what happened to Wesley. They were going to ask Grant to answer the questions he had avoided. And this time, he would not be able to end the conversation by simply standing up and leaving. Grant kept his promise. Their names were placed on the guest list. On the wedding day, the 3 brothers entered after the processional had begun. An usher saw 3 empty places in a front-side pew left by last-minute cancellations and quietly seated them together. Grant was already facing the altar. He never saw them. Not until Pastor Brooks asked the question. Not until 3 chairs moved at once. Not until his son stood. Now, inside the cathedral, Andre finally removed the folded financial record from his jacket. Grant stared at it. Claire looked between them. "Is that why they came?" Micah shook his head. "Being abandoned is why we wanted answers. It isn't why this wedding has to stop." Grant closed his eyes briefly. Andre said one name. "Wesley Crane." Grant immediately turned to Pastor Brooks. "The ceremony is over." Claire stopped him. "No." Grant looked at her. "If this wedding is over, I deserve to know why." For years, Grant had survived difficult moments by deciding when conversations began and when they ended. Claire had just taken that privilege away. Grant looked at Andre. "That document does not prove what you think it proves." Andre extended it. "Then tell us what it proves." Grant could have walked away. He could have called security. He could have turned the cathedral into a battle between billionaire attorneys and 3 angry sons. Instead, he asked the guests to move toward the rear of the cathedral and give them space. Pastor Brooks remained nearby. Then Grant began. Wesley Crane had discovered that Grant's business partner was moving company money to cover personal debts and unauthorized obligations. Grant eventually discovered it too. And instead of reporting it, he helped conceal it. He told himself the company would collapse if investors learned how badly the money had been handled. He told himself employees would lose their jobs. He told himself he needed time to repair the damage. Wesley refused. He intended to report what he had found. On the night Wesley died, he confronted Grant's business partner. Then Wesley drove away. The partner followed him. Hours later, Wesley's car was found off the road. Grant had not been there. He had not caused the crash. There was no proof another vehicle forced Wesley from the road. But afterward, Grant discovered something investigators never received. There had been threats. There were internal communications showing Wesley had been aggressively pursued that night. And Grant possessed records that could have forced investigators to look more closely at what happened before Wesley's car left the road. Claire's face had gone pale. "You gave those records to the investigators?" Grant looked at her. "No." The answer landed harder than any accusation the sons had made. Grant had buried them. Not because he knew Wesley had been murdered. He didn't. He buried them because if investigators examined Wesley's final hours closely enough, they would discover the financial misconduct Grant himself had helped conceal. Andre finally understood the date Monica had refused to alter. The record helped establish when Grant knew about the missing money. Changing it would have pushed his knowledge further away from Wesley's death. Monica had refused. Grant had fired her. And then he had abandoned her while she was carrying his children. Claire stared at him. "So you protected yourself while a dead man's family believed every question had been answered." Grant didn't argue. He had spent 20 years saying he protected the company. Employees. Investors. Families who depended on the business. Standing there, the explanation finally sounded different. He had protected Grant Holloway. Claire asked quietly, "Did Monica know all of this?" "No." The cathedral doors opened. Monica Reed stood there. Doctors had stabilized her and discharged her that morning with strict instructions to rest. She had gone home. Then Bryson's message told her where her sons were. She looked exhausted but steady as she walked toward them. "I told you not to come here." Micah answered gently. "And you never told us why." Monica looked at Grant. She knew about the suspicious transfers. She knew Wesley had questioned them. She knew Grant had asked her to alter a date after Wesley died. But she had never known there were threats. She had never known Wesley was followed. She had believed the worst thing Grant had done was hide financial misconduct after a tragic accident. For 20 years, even she had carried an incomplete truth. Her anger was quiet. "You let me think the worst choice you ever made was choosing your company over us." Grant lowered his eyes. Monica continued. "And that wasn't even the whole choice." Grant said the same thing he had used to explain himself for years. "I was afraid." Monica nodded. "So was I." Then she looked at the man she had once loved. "For once, don't make somebody else carry what you did." Grant had one final chance to protect himself. He could walk away. He could challenge the old records. He could let attorneys and public relations teams reduce everything to technical arguments. Instead, he asked Pastor Brooks for a private room and his phone. Grant called his attorney. He instructed him to arrange immediate disclosure of every surviving record connected to Wesley Crane and determine which authorities needed to receive them. Then Grant called the chair of Holloway Crest's board. He placed himself on administrative leave and requested an independent investigation. It did not erase 20 years. It did not make him courageous retroactively. It simply ended the hiding. Claire removed her engagement ring. Grant watched her place it in his hand. "I understand," he said. Claire shook her head. "I don't think you do." She looked toward Andre, Bryson, and Micah. "Finding out you had 3 sons would have been difficult. Finding out you abandoned them would have required a serious reckoning. But at least I would have been allowed to decide what that meant for us." Then she looked at Monica. "You were going to marry me while still protecting a lie connected to another man's death." Grant had no answer capable of saving the relationship. So for once, he didn't invent one. The wedding ended without vows. The consequences came slowly. Over the following months, Holloway Crest appointed outside investigators to examine the company's early financial history. Authorities reopened questions surrounding Wesley Crane's death after Grant surrendered records unavailable during the original investigation. His former business partner became part of that renewed scrutiny. Time had erased some answers. No investigation could reconstruct every minute of a 20-year-old night. But the records established that important information had been withheld and that early financial misconduct had been deliberately concealed. The consequences were serious. Corporate, civil, reputational. Grant resigned as CEO. His fortune did not magically disappear. He did not wake up poor because the truth became public. But the company he had spent 20 years using to justify his worst decisions was no longer his to control. Neither was his reputation. Claire ended the engagement permanently. She did not publicly humiliate him. She did not become another person trying to destroy him. She simply refused to build a marriage with a man whose definition of honesty depended on what he believed another person needed to know. Grant also stopped trying to solve fatherhood with money. His original instinct had been to create large trusts for his sons. Andre, Bryson, and Micah refused. Monica eventually persuaded them to accept reimbursement for documented educational expenses she had carried alone. Nothing more. The money came without conditions. No required visits. No public photographs. No expectation that financial responsibility could purchase emotional forgiveness. The brothers responded differently. Andre remained distant. He could understand Grant's fear without accepting what fear had turned him into. Bryson struggled more. For most of his childhood, he had imagined two versions of his father. One was a monster. The other was an innocent stranger who simply had never known. The real Grant was more difficult. He was neither. He was a flawed man who had repeatedly chosen himself whenever courage became expensive. Micah was willing to speak with him occasionally. But he made one thing clear. Conversation was not reconciliation. Months later, Monica returned to her bakery. Her sons became far less willing to let her ignore pain, exhaustion, or doctor's orders. Andre continued his finance studies. Bryson returned to tutoring. Micah continued pre-law. None of them abandoned their own lives to become billionaires. They had spent 20 years becoming men without Grant. His money was not going to become their new identity. One afternoon, Grant asked Monica whether he could visit the bakery after closing. She agreed. He arrived alone. No assistant. No lawyer. No gifts. No promises. Grant apologized to Monica first. Not for being exposed. Not for losing Claire. Not for losing Holloway Crest. He apologized for leaving her to raise 3 children while he reduced fatherhood to payments she had never requested. Monica listened. She did not tell him everything was forgiven. Then Grant faced his sons. He admitted there was no apology capable of recovering 20 years. He had missed birthdays, illnesses, school ceremonies, victories, disappointments, and thousands of ordinary evenings that had seemed unimportant only because he never experienced them. He did not ask them to call him Dad. Bryson was the first to soften. Maybe we can talk again. Grant nodded. Andre said nothing. Grant accepted that too. Then Micah looked at him. Being our father happened 20 years ago. Becoming our dad is something you haven't earned. Grant lowered his head once. I know. For the first time, he did not negotiate the consequence. Money had allowed Grant Holloway to postpone accountability for 20 years. But the one thing his sons wanted from him now could not be purchased, inherited, or restored by signing a check. It could only be earned. And this time, Grant understood that earning it might take longer than the rest of his life. Do you believe Grant made the right decision by finally accepting responsibility, or would you have handled it differently? Tell us in the comments. Subscribe to Luxury Justice Stories for more powerful stories of betrayal, courage, and unforgettable justice. Watch next, she humiliated a poor janitor, unaware he was a billionaire. Because sometimes the person you underestimate is the one you should have respected most.